Welcome, and today we're going to start our second empiricist and one of my favorites too. I'm a great admirer of Bishop Barkley's writing style. His philosophy is interesting, and he was quite a character, indeed, as we will discover. Bishop George Barkley, he lived from 1685 to 1753, and if you happen to look at the timeline, to put him in context, if you had a timeline there, he was born in Ireland, and he started Trinity College when he was a wee lad of 15 years old, and he graduated at 19. So, what are you doing at 19? Yeah, me too. By the time he was 28, he had published the two works that we are reading, and included, and indeed these are his best known two works. He actually lived for a time in America. It was not the U.S. at that time. This was before that. For a few years, he was hoping to set up a college with the promise of educating ministers. Well, the money didn't come. So in 1733, he donated his land and his library to this little upstart place called Yale College. Their Barkley School of Divinity, they call it the Berkeley School of Divinity, is named after him, so they don't keep the Irish pronunciation of his name, which I like, which I prefer. So after he left America, he went home. He became a bishop. He was much admired as a person, and he did that for 18 years. And then one day he went off to college with his son. Okay, in 1753 he died suddenly while his wife was reading the Bible to him. A very sweet little story. Okay, now, in getting a handle on Barkley, I think he's clearer than Locke, by the way. We need to read him primarily as an anti-Lockean. He sees Locke philosophy as being atheistic. Remember, God played no real role in Locke's philosophy. Locke doesn't need God at all, and God is only demonstrably proved that there's no central role like there is in the previous philosophers. Okay? And Locke also saw him as being skeptical. So Barkley overcomes these problems by denying the existence of material substance, really. That is, minds and ideas are all that exist. Objects are not things out there, but are simply ideas of sense that exist only in a mind. There's no reason for skepticism here. Remember Locke's skepticism that he had these material objects out there in the world that cause these ideas in our mind. They're mediated by ideas. You can't actually see them. So, I mean, how could you even talk about them? There's no way to even know that they're there. Okay. Now, one of the things I hope that will come out of our discussion here is a greater understanding of Locke. And in order to understand Barkley again, we need to look at his criticisms of Locke. In our reading for today, Barkley gives us two big points, both of them directed straight at Locke. First, in the introduction, he offers an extended critique of the notion of abstract ideas, a very important notion for Locke. Then, in part one of the principles, he offers an even more extended critique of substance. So, we're going to start then with abstract ideas. Okay, check out my picture there. I like that. Remember, okay, for Locke, ideas represent or resemble their objects. So, there's an apple in the external world, the light rays bounce off of it, and then there's this idea in your mind, so all you see is your own ideas. So these ideas, they represent their objects. So, that represents the apple in the mind, represents the apple in the world. Okay? Now, how a word can stand for a single particular is not problematic for Locke. Apple. That's okay. He can do that. But how can we get from particulars to something more general that's troublesome and needs explanation? Locke's answer is that words become general by standing for general ideas, while ideas become general by abstraction. the word apple is connected with apples by the general idea of an apple. By the way, Barkley is sharply critical of this. He claims to even say such a thing is an abuse of language. I'm going to start with number 6. Let me see. Yeah. Number 6. On page 479. In order to prepare the mind of the reader for these you're conceiving what follows, it is proper to premise somewhat by way of introduction concerning the nature and abuse of language. That's what we just said, right? But unraveling this matter leads me in some measure to anticipate my design by taking notice of what seems to have had a chief part in rendering speculation intricate and perplexed, and to have occasioned innumerable errors and difficulties in almost all parts of knowledge. And that is the opinion that the mind has the power of framing abstract ideas or notions of things. I'm betting that we have never really thought about this. This is an interesting idea. He who is not a perfect stranger to writings and disputes of philosophers must necessarily acknowledge that no small part of them are spent about abstract ideas. These are in a more special manner thought to be an object of the sciences which go by the name of logic and metaphysics, and all of that which passes under the notion of the most abstracted and sublime learning, and all of which one shall scarce find any question handled in such a manner as does not suppose there exists in the mind, and that is well acquainted with them. So all these inquiries out there, all these speculations require these abstract ideas. Now, do we have them? Look at number 10 on 481. We're not going to read that whole thing. Whether others have this wonderful faculty of abstracting their ideas, they best can tell. For myself, I find indeed I have a faculty of imagining or representing to myself the ideas of those particular things I have perceived and variously compounding and dividing them. I can imagine a man with 2 heads, or the upper parts of a man joined to the body of a horse. I can consider the hand, the eye, the nose, each by itself abstracted or separated from the rest of the body. But then whatever hand or eye I imagine, it must have some particular size and shape. And he goes on to use all these examples. Anything that you picture, anything that you imagine, has some definite shape, size, color, etc. So that there is no general abstract idea of a nose. If you conceive of a nose, it is of a particular nose. If you think of a tree, it is of a particular tree, and so on. So that these abstract ideas are not possible, and to say such a thing is, as he notes, an abuse of language. Okay? So it's almost as if Locke had not, according to Barkley, pressed his plain historical method to its logical conclusion. Locke wrote as if he could have an idea of it's not a particular triangle, neither scalene nor equilateral, but a generalized triangle. Try it. Okay? No triangle can be both and neither of these. There's no such image. What is before the mind is always a particular triangle, which stands for or represents every other particular triangle. Let's look at Thompson's reconstruction of this argument. This is from page 203 in Thompson's book. It is impossible that any bare motion, that is, motion that is neither swift nor slow, neither curvilinear nor rectilinear, exists. 2. The abstract idea of motion is the idea of bare motion. Therefore, the abstract idea of motion is something impossible. 4. There can be no idea of x if x is logically impossible. Therefore, there can be no abstract idea of motion, or of anything else for that matter, by the way. This applies to anything else. Barkley's claim that to have the faculty of abstracting ideas. And when he was making this claim, he was really making two distinct claims, that right there on the slide, even though he himself did not distinguish these two claims. First, he was asserting a psychological thesis that there are no generalized images, only specific ones. Second, he was also asserting an epistemological thesis that there are no universals, only particulars. Okay? He and Locke disagreed on the first one, right? The psychological thesis, even though they agreed on the latter. They agreed that there are no universals, but only particulars. So, for Berkeley then, all ideas are concrete particulars. Okay? And since there are no real universals, it follows that a general name is simply refers to or is a sign of several particular ideas, all of which the name indifferently represents, some of which is always present to the mind when it thinks about the meaning of this name. Okay? Now, how can we know general truths? For example, take a triangle and its interior angles adding up to 180 degrees. Well, we can be sure that what is true of one triangle is true of all others because the particular properties that differ, the color, the size, the shape, etc., do not enter into the proof. They all have in common the fact that the interior angles equal 180 degrees. Okay? That is, these other things, the various length of the lines and all of that, are irrelevant for the definition of a triangle, but they are necessary in order for us to conceive one. But no matter how you conceive it, it's always going to be a particular triangle. So, notice this. Abstract ideas are impossible. Not only are they impossible, but they are unnecessary. We don't need them because a particular idea can be used to represent all the particulars of its kind. That is, all ideas are particular, but we can and do put these to a general representative use. All right, so that was Berkeley on abstract ideas. We're now going to begin Berkeley's critique on of material substance. And for this one, we're going to do a little exercise. And normally, if we were in class together, we would all do this together. But I'm going to do it, and you're welcome to join along with me. In order to help us with this one, I have procured this artifact from Ireland, and so you see 1608, and what we're going to do is, what I'm going to do actually, I don't know if you are or not, but you're more than welcome to, is I want us to draw the image that we actually see as we see it, not as we know it to be. Okay? So let me see here. And normally I would put this in front of the table, in front of the classroom, and you all would, measure, see how big is that you're seeing out there. So for me, it's about that big. So on my paper, it's about that big, and so then I'm going to draw what I actually see, not what I know it to be. And I'm going to pause this recording while I do this, so that you don't have to wait for me to wade through all of this. Okay, just for a minute. Okay, I have my picture done, and I'm not an artist, right? You've seen my writing on the board, but this isn't too bad, right? See that? That's not too bad. Actually, that's pretty good, right? See? There you go. You get closer, it gets bigger, doesn't it? Right? Okay. Now, those words you saw beside it was a list of the attributes of that image that I have. Okay, and included in my list of attributes is transparent. Okay, it's apparently glass. It has some metal on it too. There are some colors: red, gold, white, black as well. slightly reflective. Yeah, it's kind of tall and rectangular. But it also, if I were to measure this image, the image that I drew would be about 5 inches tall. But let me compare them now. Uh-oh, that's about 11 inches tall. But this isn't the same as that at all. What did I draw? We'll come back to that in just a minute. But notice, whenever we list the attributes of something, where's the matter? If you played along with me on this game, did you list the matter? Okay, matter, you see, is just another abstract idea. Okay, just as the idea of woman either names nothing at all or is simply a way of referring indifferently to Tondria, Chloe, Colette, Bailey, Alia, Bryn, or Victoria. Okay? So matter either names nothing at all or is merely a way of referring indifferently to a great many different particular sense qualities. Try, Barkley says, try to find the original idea of matter. All we can ever find are particular things. Okay? Analyze them. Analyze what we saw. Can you find matter in there? No. All we find are certain sensible qualities. Whenever we describe matter, a thing, matter is not part of the description. Let's look at Barkley, number 1 on page 487. It is evident to anyone who takes a survey of the objects of humane knowledge that they are either ideas actually imprinted on the senses, or else such as are perceived by attending to the passions and operations of the mind, or lastly, ideas formed by help or memory and imagination, either compounding, dividing, or barely representing those originally perceived in the aforesaid ways. By sight, I have the ideas of light and colors in their several degrees and variations. By touch, I perceive, for example, hard and soft, heat and cold, motion and resistance, and all these more and less either to quantity or degree. Smelling furnishes me, and so on. Taste and so forth. For example, a certain color, taste, smell, figure, and consistence having been observed to go together, are accounted as one distinct thing, signified with the name apple. Other collections of ideas constitute a stone, a tree, a book, and the like sensible things, which as they are pleasing or disagreeable excite the passions, love, hatred, joy, grief, and so forth. Now, this is not an unusual kind of thing for them to say, because remember, since all we can perceive is our own ideas, this is what things are. Things are collections of simple ideas. Okay? Since that's all we can perceive anyway, is our own ideas. But notice this. In none of these things is matter to be found. Okay? The conclusion that Locke should have drawn from his plain historical method is the terms such as matter, body, and material substance should be dropped from the philosophical vocabulary because they don't mean anything. Those are meaningless terms. Okay? Now, let's look at 491, number 23. In this section, we're not going to read all this necessarily, but what he says here is look, okay, you say that you can think of something existing outside of a mind, right? So you think of it. Well, where's it existing then? In your mind, right? So you can imagine parks or books existing in a closet and nobody nearby to perceive it. But what do but conceive it in your own mind? You cannot conceive of the unconceived, right? To make it out, this is the last part of 23 there. To make this out, it is necessary that you conceive of them existing unconceived or unthought of, which is a manifest repugnance. When we do our utmost to conceive the existence of external bodies, we're all the while only contemplating our own ideas. But the mind, taking no notice of itself, is deluded to think it can and does conceive bodies existing unthought of without the mind, though at the same time they are apprehended by or exist in itself. A little attention will discover to anyone the truth and evidence of what is said here, make it unnecessary to insist on the other proofs against the existence of material substance. The first part of 24, just the very first part. It is very obvious upon the least inquiry into our own thoughts to know whether it is possible for us to understand what is meant by the absolute existence of sensible objects in themselves without the mind. To me, it is evident those words mark out either a direct contradiction or else nothing at all. Okay, look. To be is to be perceived. Okay? In a later work called Alciphron, Alciphron and Euphener are discussing the things that they see at a distance. Okay? And this is very interesting. He talks about how distance is learned by experience. Someone who was blind from birth and just gained their sight would not know immediately that the things in front of them existed very far away. They would have to learn depth perception, in other words, that things existed far away. Okay? So, he said, how would he know that things aren't in his eye, other than a distance? Alciphron says, it must seem so. On the other hand, I can hardly persuade myself that if we're in such a state, I should think those objects which I now see at so great a distance to be at no distance at all. This is odd. Euphener then replies, Euphener representing Barkley here. It seems then that you now think the object of sight are at a distance from you? Doubtless I do. Can one question but yonder castle is at a great distance? Tell me, Alciphron, can you discern the doors, windows, and battlements of that same castle? I cannot. At this distance it seems only a small round tower. Euphener. But I, who have been at it, know that it's no small round tower, but a large building with battlements and turrets which you seem not to see. What would you infer from this? I would infer that the very object which you strictly and properly perceive by sight is not that thing which is several so miles distant. Why so? Because a little round thing is one thing, and a great square object is another, is it not? Okay, y'all. I drew a picture. A 5-inch bottle is one thing. An 11-inch bottle is another. These are not the same thing. Yet that is what I saw. Okay? Tell me, is not the visible appearance alone the proper object of sight? It is. What think you now, said Euphener, of the visible appearance of yonder planet, or picture the moon at night? Is it not a round, luminous flat? Is it not round, luminous flat, no bigger than a sixpence, about like that? What then? Tell me then, what do you think of the planet itself? Do you not conceive it to be a vast opaque globe with several unequal risings and valleys? I do. How can you therefore conclude that the proper object of your sight exists at a distance? The proper object of your sight does not exist at a distance. For your further conviction, but do consider that crimson cloud. Think you that if you were at the very place where it is now, you would perceive anything like what you now see? By no means. I should perceive only a dark mist. Is it not plain, therefore, that neither the castle, the planet, nor the cloud, nor the bottle, which you see here, are those real ones that exist over there, at a distance? Notice this then. Okay? You see things here as if they were over there, but it's all here. Okay? Why? SCSKippy. To be is to be perceived. Okay? This one's important. That's what SCSKippy, to be is to be perceived. Like Locke, Barkley believed that we can perceive only our own ideas and all ideas are mind-dependent. If all we can perceive our own ideas, then we cannot perceive external objects. An idea can exist only in the mind that perceives it. Okay? We're going to look at number 3. Page 47. Is that right? 47, yeah. But perhaps it may be too partial to ourselves to place fault in the originally in our faculties and rather wrong to make use of them. It's a hard thing to suppose that right deductions from true principles could ever end in such consistent. We should believe that God has dealt more bountifully with the sons of men than to give them a strong desire for such knowledge as placed quite out of their reach. Wait a minute, why are we doing that? Never mind. Just as there is no universal woman apart from individual women, so there is no universal being apart from their being perceived. To be means to be perceived. That is, to be an object for some mind or another. So not only does the mind know only its own ideas, but it cannot know anything that is not an idea. You cannot know external objects. External objects are not ideas. They don't make any sense. Their words make no sense because there is nothing for there's nothing to know about, right? I mean, there cannot be anything that is not for a mind. Try to think of not for a mind. You cannot do it. For Barkley, then, existence independent of mind is a contradiction in terms and amounts to saying that you can conceive of what is unconceived. And you cannot conceive of what is unconceived. Okay, we're going to wrap up this session with 2 more arguments for the existence of material substance, generally arguments against Locke. The first one occurs on page 489. It's number 10. We're not going to read that one because I'm just going to tell you what that one says. That one argues, okay, remember, Barkley claims, and whether he does this or not is a bit suspect. Barkley claims that Locke says that secondary qualities exist only in the mind. They are mind dependent. Okay? Therefore, they are separable ultimately from primary qualities. In that section, Barkley argues that no, in fact, you can't conceive of primary qualities without some kind of secondary quality too, without some color, without some, with some other attributes for you to be able to think of it, have a picture of it, okay, in order to conceive of it. So if primary and secondary qualities are inseparable, and if secondary qualities exist only in the mind, therefore primary qualities exist only in the mind too. Okay, there you go. In 14, on 489, that should be 489, sorry about that on the slide there. On 489, he makes the argument about relativity to observer argument. Okay, you remember we did that thing about direct realism and how some secondary qualities are relative to an observer, therefore that led Locke to conclude that they're not really intrinsic to the object. Well, in this section, Barkley says basically the same thing are true of primary qualities as well, that they are just as relative to the observer as are secondary qualities. Because look, okay, my bottle, there you go, it's about that big now. Okay, now it's about that big. How big is it? Well, it kind of depends on your perspective, doesn't it? In other words, it's relative to a perceiver. Okay? It's relative to a perceiver. What else can you say about that? That's 14 on 489. And, to a mite, a little piece of chalk is a great big thing, but to us, it's just a little bitty thing. Let me conclude this part with just a brief story, personal story. This is true. We moved to the States, back to the States from Istanbul, Turkey, when I was like 3 years old. My dad was stationed over there for the first 3 years of my life. And the house we moved in Texas had this alley that ran between it and our neighbor's house. When I was a kid, I thought that alley was a great big thing. I remember it being very large. This alley was big. It was cool. And when the rain flowed, water flowed through it, we'd play and all that. Well, years later, we went back to drove by that house. That alley was just a little bitty old gully. I mean, it was nothing. Now, did I misremember it? Nope. It depends on how big you are, too. In other words, shape, size, mass, all those things are just as relative to the perceiver, too. Finally, on this one, your assignment. For this part, we're not going to deal with Barkley's arguments about material substance. We're going to do that next time. We're going to be concerned with Barkley's arguments against abstract or general ideas from that introduction section. Okay? Locke claims we can have them. Locke has to have them, right? Well, who's right? So you're going to engage those two, okay? And I will put up a turn in thing for you to turn that in, and we'll have more fun with Barkley next time.